Nolan Wells' independent autopsy results were just presented by attorney Ben Crump in this press release, or in this press conference that he literally just completed. I got all the details. I took notes today because I wanted y'all to know how serious I was. And again, I see y'all cutting up in my comments and I do not care. Govern yourselves accordingly, but you actually don't even have to. I'm telling you what the man said from the autopsy before I got time to go read something. And so once I go read stuff, then I'll clear up whatever I said, didn't say, didn't articulate well, whatever. All right, so the cause of death, manner of death, undetermined, pending further investigation. We're going to dive into that first because I'm going to reiterate this later. Ultimately, there were certain parts of his body that this particular examiner was not able to examine because the initial autopsy had already examined it, maybe dissected it, maybe removed it, and that's why there's still that pending further investigation. Additionally, remember I was talking about shouldn't they be able to tell time and anything else? Date of death unknown. Preliminary findings. So there is some red discoloration in the back of his head. There was marked decomposition. So because he allegedly was in some water, some of his body, it made it very difficult for you to be able to determine external marks, any signs of like fighting or any type of harm or injury to the skin of his body. So this required the examiner to start to look in different ways where he would have to go in and cut out certain parts in order to be able to address any other types of abrasions, any types of trauma, things of that nature. So in that regard, the inner neck structure was the other part of his body that this examiner felt it would be necessary to review. They did confirm that when an autopsy takes place, they do remove all of the organs and then they put them in something and then put them back inside your body, because whenever you are then buried or whatever happens to your remains, then your entire body goes along. In this particular instance, when they take certain parts of the body part out, perhaps the first examiner needed to do further investigation. So this second independent autopsy was not able to truly observe like the neck, the aorta, the airways, the lungs, the trachea, any of that. That was already removed, which implies that the initial examiner sent that off for additional testing. This would be able to confirm whether that lower back redness and discoloration that was below the skin, whether that portion of it was in connection to any type of neck injuries as well. So he was unable to identify that. There are lots of limitations to him being able to give any type of conclusive results of what could have caused this, and a lot of it is because of the decomposition. The other part being a lot of it being around there were certain organs that he felt he needed to observe. The other thing to keep in mind here is with the independent autopsy happening secondly and that person not being present when the initial autopsy took place, the contents of his stomach, his lungs, and his airways, he wasn't able to give that initial assessment of what could have happened there. The toxicology report is obviously something that is already being processed and they have to wait for that. Let's hope that they actually release the complete findings of that and they don't withhold information. In addition to that, there were no fractures or any deep tissue injuries outside of what was happening in the back of the head across the rest of his body. Outside of that, there are just a lot of things that we can't necessarily clear up or identify. A lot of the factors of this particular autopsy findings are very much contingent on who found them first. Some other things that he did mention is, there are some people that are saying, the reports are saying that he was found face down. There are also reports that say he was fully clothed, but all other content that shows him present, he had on no shirt. The other thing that the examiner also made mention of that was very important was to understand how Nolan Wells may have entered the water, adding the additional context that he can swim. Also, the condition that Nolan Wells might have been in at the time of entering the water. Was he conscious or not conscious? Was he forced or unforced? Can he swim? The answer is yes to that. And then it's just a matter of like knowing what happened in that regard in order to be able to assess how his body may have responded to it. And this is why things like the contents of his stomach, the contents of his lungs, and his airways are important, because then they could either confirm or deny whether drowning is actually a part of it. But even if he can swim, drowning can still be an issue if he's being forced, if he's unconscious. There are also other reports out there that people are saying that he might have been under the influence of something and drinking beer or something. I don't know how true that is or not. In general, we're not able to necessarily clarify if there were any fractures in the areas that were not provided to this examiner. Now, this is what I want to understand. In an investigation like this, if they knew that they wanted to have an independent autopsy, are they able to do the autopsy at the same time? Or is it standard procedure for the initial autopsy to take place and then the independent one to take place days later, when we know there are circumstances such as this? Because in my opinion, now that I've listened to these findings, how is this autopsy, this independent autopsy, even productive outside of the fact that he was able to identify that there was some redness and something happened in the back of his head? Okay, great. So we can confirm that. The red flag here is the previous examiner never examined that area. There were no cuts, no lacerations, anything that would signal that they actually went in to test that area to assume that there were any injuries there. The other side of this that the examiner made mention of on several occasions is that understanding decomposition of bodies as it relates to water. Oftentimes, when you don't see any cuts or lacerations or any type of trauma across the external portion of the body, it is important for you to start looking into different areas of the body internally so that you're able to see if there is any like trauma to the head that maybe the water has kind of like eliminated whatever the abrasions and aggressiveness to the skin would look like. I would think that's not the case, but ultimately you need to kind of look below the skin and you need to look internally to see if there are any abrasions, any trauma, any injuries that you otherwise would not be able to see because the body is so inflamed and swollen from retaining the water. That part makes sense to me. The fact that the initial examiner didn't cut the back of his head to address that, knowing that there were neck injuries or something is going on with the neck. So that's the other thing. Something happened with said neck because the neck portion, the internal neck portion, was not sent with the body. And that is usual. That is common practice when further investigation is taking place. So all that we can do at this point is assume that they will come back with results that tell us something about that neck, that trachea, that aorta, that lung, that stomach contents, whatever, the airways, whatever was happening in there. Mississippi examiner, I hope you got the contents of that and I hope you sent that off. Toxicology reports, let's hope that that tells us something too. The problem that I have with this is that we can't really compare apples to apples. We're comparing apples to oranges now because the independent autopsy didn't have the option to review the contents of his stomach, his airways, his lungs. So if there was water in there or there wasn't water in there, whatever was in there, we don't know now. We have to lean on the initial examiner. The initial examiner is going to withhold as much information as possible as long as they can, I think, until that toxicology report comes back. But I am on pins and needles to see what they say about his neck because that's going to be the largest part of this, as well as that back of that head with that redness. What do you guys think about these findings?